slides which were given in 3 years ago. We had organized a conference in Pune on history of astronomy. In that talk was given by Professor Govind Swarup on his own radio astronomy work. And I have those slides with me. I will try, and I also have an article by him subsequently written for the same conference about his radio astronomy work. But it shows you, I will show you briefly those slides, but it will show you that when he talked about radio astronomy and the achievements of radio astronomy, he still mentions himself most minimally. He simply says, this happened, this was done, that was done, without pushing himself forward. And that is why, in spite of being one of the great Navratnas from India, he did not receive the kind of political recognition that others have done. So he got Padma Shri in 1973, but worldwide, for example, he was a member of the Third World Academy of Sciences and so on. So his international recognitions were great, but somehow in India we did not celebrate him as much as we should have. Let me quickly run through some of the slides that as I said, were used by a Professor Wayne Orkiston from Australia while speaking in honor of Professor Govind Swarup. And this was about 3 years ago, where he talked about the great radio astronomy work. So if you can see these slides, in the first picture itself, the person who is sitting with a tie and a jacket is the young Govind Swarup in Australia as his first piece of work in radio astronomy. And you can see the various telescopes on which he worked. I will quickly run through. Today, that radio astronomy culture has spread significantly even in India. So we have the giant meter wave radio telescope at UT, which is run by National Center for Radio Astrophysics from Pune. Then at UT, we have the equatorial UT radio telescope. At Bangalore, Raman Research Institute and Indian Astrophysics have a radio telescope. Kodaikanal Observatory also has a radio telescope. In Calcutta, there is a small radio observatory. Similarly, PRL and so on. So eventually, after Govind Swarup started work, there have been some radio telescopes that have come up. But the work of Govind Swarup in GMRT and UT radio telescope simply is out of this world. And these are some of the telescopes he worked on. There is a picture of Govind Swarup with Kundu over here. Professor Chitre will recognize him. This is Homi Bhabha, who invited Govind Swarup to come and work at TIFR and build India's entry into radio telescopes. These are some of the radio telescopes he made. I think somewhere there is a picture of the Kalyan radio telescope. But before I go there, these are the outstanding men who made a difference to his life and career into the field of radio astronomy. This is the UT radio telescope that I was telling about. This is from the control room. It's a very small. What you see here is roughly about 50 meters out of the 500-meter long telescope, half a kilometer long radio telescope. What you see as a central line is the line in which you collected all the radio signals. And the curved thing that you see was the one that had wire meshes, which reflected the radio waves onto the central line. And then that light was collected and analyzed in the little control room on the side. And even today, like I said, 50 years after it was manufactured, put into service in 1963, it is still a very effective telescope. And even as recently as last year, some major work on interplanetary scintillations has come from this telescope. So the site was selected in 1965 and the construction was completed in December 69. And by 71, he had established this radio telescope. And he was born in 1929. So by the time it was 69, he was already 40 years old and still looking at great things to do. In 70, UT radio telescope started. A lot of initial work was done by him. And then the next big project of his was, like I said, the giant meter wave radio telescope, 40-meter dishes. And in case you don't appreciate how much is 40 meters, 20 people can sleep head to head on this telescope, and you just about cover the edges of it. A typical human being is about 2 meters, and this is 40 meters in diameter. And it is each individual dish is fully movable and can see any region of the sky. And he did not choose UT because he did not choose Pune or this Narayangaon site just because it was close to Bombay. He and his colleagues took radio sensitive equipment, took jeeps and went through the entire subcontinent of India to look for a site which would be most appropriate. So he actually traveled to unknown and isolated regions of the country in a jeep. And I'm told that he ran through 2 or 3 jeeps looking for a site where he could put up the radio telescope, and eventually Narayangaon turned out to be the best site. So Maharashtra has the privilege of hosting this telescope. At GMI in 1984, like he says, he proposed the GMRT with this, which is fully Earth rotational axis and so on, and working at slightly lower wavelengths so that he could make them very big, and they remain a unique window even today in the radio telescope. And this is what the radio telescope looks like. Like I said, 1,000 square kilometers, 30-kilometer dishes, and he showed that these Y-shaped dishes would effectively, when put together, would work like one gigantic 1,000-kilometer diameter telescope. And he established its working, and it has been working very beautifully for about 30 odd years. And in fact, last year, it went through, 2 years ago, it went through a major revision, and in 2019, significantly augmented. And on his birthday, the upgraded GMRT telescope was once more made available to the world, and it has been doing some phenomenal work. These are some of the objects that has been photographed from giant GMRT telescope, and I could go into the details of these objects, but I don't think I either have the time or really the capability of explaining all the nitty-gritties that he has got, just to tell you how phenomenal it was. And he was now at towards, in the last few years, he had become interested in this square kilometer array that was being conceived of to be built in South Africa, of which Govind Swarup was a critical part because of his technical knowledge and his capability of bringing the Indian team to participate, which would have brought massive amount of technological capabilities into this project. There have been other telescopes since that have come. China has got one 7,000 meter square telescope, which is a single dish. They have dug out from a mountain. Japan now has Chile. Europeans have built some telescopes in Chile and so on. But in spite of all these things that have been built, UT radio telescope, GMRT, remains unique at the wavelengths at which it operates, and it remains one of the world's largest telescopes. So this is what Govind Swarup said about himself and his own work, and how he saw the field of radio astronomy from his perspective. I also want to show you some rare pictures of Govind Swarup in an article that Govind Swarup wrote for the proceedings of that conference. So in the proceedings, again, he produced the map. He talked about his work in various observatories in Australia, but he remembered that Dr. Krishnan, he remained grateful to Dr. Krishnan for the first person to invite him to come back to India and start radio telescope in India, but he decided to go and get a degree from USA, from Stanford. He got his radio astronomy degree, and then came to India and started a whole series of projects, including, like I said, the Kalyan radio telescope, the UT radio telescope, and then finally the giant meter wave radio telescope. And when square kilometer array comes up, I'm sure they will remember Govind Swarup as one of the greats who created. So this is the picture of the Kalyan, so this is the picture of the Kalyan observatory that he built.
No, it has not changed.
This is the Kalyan observatory on the right of this picture.
No, can't see it.
Oh, okay,
you have not changed your screen, I think.
Different picture.
I've not shared my screen. I'm sorry. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, now can you see?
No.
Okay.
You have to close this and select the other folder.
Yes. Now?
Yes.
Now on the right side that you see the area is the Kalyan Observatory. So let me go back to this. So you didn't even see, you saw the PowerPoint. Yeah, so this is the article that he wrote 2 years ago about his work in radio astronomy in India. He starts with remembering Krishnan. Then this is his own picture in Australia. Then these are the various telescopes he worked on in Australia. And you can see even at that time he was bald. But anyway, this is with Kundu, another great Professor Chitre will recognize of the world of astronomy, radio astronomy. And this is on the right side, you can see a picture which is the UT radio, which is the Kalyan Observatory that he built as his first program in TIFR. That eventually went defunct. It is no longer in view, but it was once in Kalyan. Then he, working with, under the leadership of Bhabha and the support that Bhabha gave him, he built this UT radio telescope. And now you can get some idea about how gigantic it is. And this is the OT radio telescope he talks about, and some of the images that he has got from OT radio telescope and from the giant meter wave radio telescope. And I think his work speaks for himself much more than anybody else can speak about him. So with these words of great respect and reverence to Professor Govind Swarup, I would like to end my talk here.
Thank you.
Professor Chitre.
Sir, would you like to say some things?
Well, Mayank, you have covered large part
Sir.
of Govind Swarup's scientific biography.
Yes, sir.
So I don't have much to add, except that I should perhaps recount for you some of the reminiscences. Because in a sense, Govind has been my teacher and mentor.
Spotlight, please.
Sir?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good.
Yes, yes. I'm asking the host to spotlight you, and please turn on your video, sir.
Something is not quite working. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to generate words. So this particular thing is not responding. Okay. Yeah, now let's see. So, you see, when I was at Caltech, my wife and I decided with the arrival of our young baby that we will return to India and give back to our country what we had earned, by way of training in the university sector of India. And later on, I spent large part of my time in Cambridge, then Leeds, and then Caltech. And from Caltech, I wrote a letter. And I think Govind Swarup was the senior astronomer. So he really processed my case. MGK Menon was director, and I was offered a position. Actually, curiously, the application came from PRL because Vikram Sarabhai wanted me to join PRL, Astronomy Group. And when I requested Vikram Kaka, as we used to call him, his nephews were with us, Anand and Cyril Sarabhai in Cambridge. So he would come over, and then he persuaded us to join PRL, me and then Narlikar. Narlikar came back later, 5 years later, than 1967 when I returned to India. So in a sense, both Govind Swarup and Yashpal, they were the initial people who welcomed us and, made our stay comfortable, and they would involve us in their social occasions. And I would have most of my discussions, with Govind Swarup because he was interested in pulsars, which were just detected then. And I had come back from Caltech working on neutron stars and solar neutrino problem. In fact, my first colloquium in TIFR was in solar neutrino puzzle. Why are we seeing fewer neutrinos than what solar models predict? But I think I got into neutron star physics at that time, and that interested Govind Swarup. And we worked together. Pulsars were just recently discovered in 1967. So he said, Kumar, let's build a model. Unfortunately, we were barking up the wrong tree. We thought of pulsations on the surfaces of neutron stars as being the cause of pulsar radiation. We should have thought of rotating neutron stars, which is what Tommy Gould thought of, and he published a one-page paper in Nature. Our paper also got into Nature at that time, but we were peddling more the radiation from pulsars coming from the surface of neutron stars. And then, of course, it fell by the wayside. We should have thought of a clock mechanism and neutron star rotating at a pretty constant rate, once a second or even 1,000 times a second per millisecond pulsar, was the basic underlying mechanism But, come what may, I shared with Govind, and I think he used me as a sounding board many times. He was building up his group. Kapahi, Anand Krishnan, Gopal Krishna, they were all inducted in his effort, and he was the main driver. UT telescope, in fact, was just coming up, and a year later, in 1967 summer, Govind invited us to visit UT. And we said, no, our baby is very small. We said, no problem, we'll take care of everything. So my wife and I, along with our young baby, hardly 6 months old, we visited UT, and I saw the work in the slopes of the UT hill, the right magnitude, which coincided with the latitude, and which is what Vahia described for you. And he had his dreams. You see, he would say, let's extract science out of UT radio telescope. And as Vahia emphasized, UT radio telescope still continues to be an operational instrument. It's unfortunate that only Manoharan stayed back on the hills of UT and worked there. Other colleagues moved to, first Bangalore and then to Pune. But I saw all this development with my own eyes, and with my own ears, I heard what Govind's dreams were. He wanted to extract science out of the facility which he had delivered. UT radio telescope. Well, there are some science, particularly on the lunar occultation program and the sizes of radio sources. But I don't think many of us, including Narlikar and me, really extracted as much science out of his radio size survey, how radio sizes become smaller further out you go. So that was his regret, that we did not join in. But, we had, I had my own problems in neutron star physics and X-ray sources and whatever. But he kept his interest. He would just walk into your office and ask what was going on. And he was a very curious intellectual who was always willing to learn. And that's what I admired about Govind Swarup. See, he was my teacher, he was my mentor. At the same time, I could see the enthusiasm with which he was driving his group. So UT telescope came up in 1970s. And at that time, he was thinking about next project. So I said to Govind, I could take that liberty. Govind, you are a very restless, creative individual. Not that UT had just become operational. You are thinking of a giant meter wave radio telescope, GMRT. He actually was thinking of first the giant equatorial radio telescope, GERT program, which is what Vahia alluded to. And then he conceived of GMRT. And I recall distinctly when he submitted the project, GMRT project, to DAE, Dr. Ramana was the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission. He invited me and Narlikar as experts to comment. And this was in the old yacht club. Govind made the presentation. And then Ramana asked us to make, and we made encouraging noises, how it is worthwhile to support this project, where Govind had asked for only 30 crores for the entire GMRT project. And the only comment Ramana made was, Govind, you're being a bania. Why are you so tight-fisted in asking for only 30 crores? We'll give you 50 crores. And sure enough, GMRT project eventually ended up with 50 crore tag. So that way, I think DAE was quite generous. Pity that Homi Bhabha didn't live to see all this development. In a sense, Dr. Homi Bhabha, he used to consult his Cambridge friends. John Cockcroft was his main advisor. And Cockcroft said to Govind, look, the Cavendish Laboratory, which was known for its researches in nuclear physics and particle physics, when in Rutherford's time, when he was director of the Cavendish lab, he was the Cavendish professor, Bragg came in. He succeeded Rutherford, and Bragg made a switch. He said, fine, let's just move, because he felt that nuclear physics and particle physics didn't have much future. We couldn't compete with the Europeans and the Americans in the kind of outlay one needed for researchers in particle physics and nuclear physics. And nuclear physics by then had started receding into the background. So Bragg said he invited Martin Ryle to set up radio astronomy program in Cavendish, and he invited Max Peruz to set up the molecular biology program. And the rest is history. Nobel laureates came out of these two groups. So that's the dream Bhabha had. It's unfortunate, even though Bhabha encouraged Govind Swarup to set up the radio telescope, and he invited Obaid Siddiqui to set up the molecular biology group, we did not produce the class which Cambridge had produced from the Cavendish, namely Martin Ryle, Anthony Hewish, both of whom pulled the Nobel Prizes, and then Max Peruz and his group, Kendrew and others, and Fred Sanger later, who pulled the Nobel Prizes in molecular biology. It was Govind's regret, let me share with you, that we could not get work of that kind produced, which is Nobel Prize worthy. And that's what he used to privately mourn, that we are not applying enough intellectual energies to pull work of that magnitude, of that class, of that quality. Oh, we do competent work, of course, competent science, but not the same Nobel Prize timber class. Not that we did not have. Govind Swarup, in my view, deserved a Nobel Prize for having built up the radio telescopes of the kind at UT and at GMRT. And now, later on, see, Govind Swarup was a restless intellectual. He would never stay quiet. I'm sure even in eternity, now that we have lost him, he's thinking of another project. So that was Govind's restless intellect. And in a way, we have lost him now. At age of 91, he was ailing for a few weeks. And unfortunately, yesterday evening, he succumbed to the neurodegeneration disease. He couldn't even speak. He couldn't use his vocal cords. He couldn't eat. So that was the kind of physical condition. Knowing him, he was very restless and he didn't like to be in that condition. Anyway, Square Kilometer Array was the next project on his card. I hope his group, the radio astronomers, would take the initiative forward. But that is on a foreign land. What Swarup would have liked, see, he was indigenously grown individual, starting with NPL under Krishnan, which Vahia mentioned. He then came to NPL, PRL, and then to TIFR, where he was encouraged. And I must say, Dr. Bhabha, who unfortunately did not live, he perished on in an air crash in Mont Blanc. So that was a shame that these pioneers did not live to see the fruits. Govind Swarup managed, both Govind Swarup and Siddiqui. Siddiqui built up his molecular biology group, and he did his bit, which was then further carried forward by Vijay and others, the young molecular biologists. So We hope, though, we will do a kind of research and science which will take us to the frontiers. And we are hoping that we will have Nobel Prizes coming out, which has eluded us. See, the only Nobel Prize winner you can think of is, well, what do you think? S.N. Bose was Nobel Prize worthy. Meghnad Saha was Nobel Prize worthy. They did not pull the Nobel Prizes, though, even though their names was on the committee, small group, which proposed their names. So I'm not saying that Nobel Prize is the ultimate. You see, when Nobel Prize has its own philosophy, its own sort of biases, but it's about time that the kind of facilities which people like Siddiqui and Govind Swarup have delivered for us, we had to push it to an extent that will do them proud. And we have young workers in radio astronomy and in molecular biology who have the intrinsic capability of delivering science of that class. So that's my philosophy. Anyway, we have lost Govind Swarup. I lost my teacher and my mentor. May his soul rest in peace. But I'm sure it will be a restless soul. Because Govind Swarups of this world, they never rest. They're always thinking in their mind of the next project they should work on. It's a pity that we have not imbibed from Govind or from Obaid Siddiqui the kind of intellectual traditions which we would like to develop. We are trying, but we have our own limitations. But Govind, we will keep your flag flying here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us, and this is priceless. This speech is recorded, and we will be uploading it on our website. Also on Facebook, it should be available for some time. Thank you very much, Dr. Vahia and Professor Chitre.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for the support. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing a wonderful service to the community. I hope the youngsters, the young crowd, is benefiting from our sermons.
Well, this is hardly a sermon. It's really.
We have been preaching you. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
So, let's hope.
We need preachers of this kind. We have so many preachers of the other kind.
That this kind of preaching has to be there.
We have lots of other kind of preaching nowadays, and this is most welcome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's our job, to convey the excitement at the frontiers of science to the young generation.
Yes.
That's all we can do. That's all we can give. All right. So, thank you very much, Mugdha-tai, for having us on your program. And as I said, this is kind of a discourse. And I like to speak. I'm sure Vahia also likes to speak. So thank you for providing us the audience. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vahia.
Pleasure is also ours. Thanks.
We can end the meeting, please.